Have you ever felt like someone was subtly rewriting your reality as you lived it? Like you're trapped in a psychological thriller, but the villain isn't lurking in the shadows. They're sitting across from you, smiling. Carl Jung once said that everything that bothers us about others can actually help us understand ourselves. But what if that irritation isn't accidental? What if it's calculated? What if someone has turned your own mind into their personal game? Stick with me, because what I'm about to share will shift how you see every relationship in your life. Jung uncovered something incredibly deep about human nature. We all carry a shadow. The parts of ourselves we avoid or deny. But here's what most people don't know. Emotional manipulators don't just have shadows. They use yours as a weapon. And by the time we're done here, you'll understand exactly how they do it and, more importantly, how to stop them. Imagine this. You're having a simple conversation, and suddenly you're apologizing for something you don't even remember doing. You walk away feeling confused, emotionally exhausted, questioning your own memory. Sound familiar? Here's the disturbing part. This isn't random. Jung once said, the most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely. Emotional manipulators prey on that fear. They know most people would rather doubt themselves than confront the painful idea that someone close to them is toying with their mind. Jung's work on the collective unconscious showed that we're all shaped by universal psychological patterns: the need to belong, the fear of being left, the craving to feel understood. But what if I told you manipulators instinctively study these patterns like predators watching prey? They don't need a PhD in psychology. They just know what Jung spent his life studying, that the human mind has soft spots in. They take advantage of every one. Now here's where it gets darker. Jung explained that we often project the shadow our buried feelings and thoughts onto other people. It's a built-in psychological defense, but manipulators twist that process. Here's how. They flip the script. They blame you for what they're doing. They make you feel like you're being dramatic, irrational, or too emotional. It's like psychological judo. They're using your own instincts against you. Jung said, projection is one of the most common psychic phenomena. Everything unconscious in ourselves, we see in our neighbor. But what if your neighbor is deliberately planting those ideas in your unconscious? That manipulator becomes a warped mirror, reflecting a distorted version of who you are. Someone who's always wrong, always emotional, always the issue. And because these traits echo your insecurities, you start to believe it. But it gets even more subtle. Jung taught that we all have a persona, social mask we wear to get through life. It's not forget helps us function. But manipulators don't just wear masks. They force you to wear one, too. They mold you into what Jung would call a false persona version of yourself that exists only to keep them happy, to avoid conflict, to maintain the illusion of peace. And here's what makes it dangerous. That false persona feels like growth. It feels like you're becoming more patient, more forgiving, more wise. But you're not growing, you're disappearing. Jung said, the path to becoming our true selves, what he called individuation, means embracing every part of ourselves, even the uncomfortable ones. But manipulators block that process. They punish your authenticity and reward your compliance. Now, here's the twist. They get you to participate in your own psychological imprisonment. You become the guard in your own emotional prison. Jung found that groups, families, communities, even societies, can share a collective shadow. And manipulators instinctively tap into this. They don't just control you. They influence everyone around you. They become the storyteller of your life, deciding who you are, what you've done, how others should see you. Jung said, the individual has always had to struggle not to be overwhelmed by the tribe. But what if the tribe itself has been emotionally hijacked? Manipulators cast themselves as the logical one, the calm, reasonable victim. Meanwhile, you're painted as the unstable, emotional, impossible one. But here's the truth. Most people. Miss Jung said, we all have an opposite-gendered force within the anima in men, the animus in women. This is our emotional and intuitive center. Manipulators target this exact part of your psyche. They play on your empathy, your need to nurture, your instinct to heal. They make their wounds your emotional job to fix. Jung said, your vision will become clear only when you can look into your heart. Who looks outside, dreams. Who looks inside, awakens. But manipulators make sure you're always looking outward at their pain, their struggles, their reality. They keep you so focused on them that you forget to even notice yourself. And this is the psychological trap. Jung believed the whole point of psychological growth is to become whole, to become who you truly are. And manipulators cannot allow that. Why? Because once you become fully yourself, they can't manipulate you anymore. Someone who trusts their intuition, who's integrated their shadow, sees right through the game. Jung taught that the key to this transformation is something called active imagination, learning to connect with your unconscious, to hear your inner voice. But manipulators flood your mind with noise, doubt, and confusion. They drown out your voice. They turn your own mind into a war zone where their voice is always the loudest. But here's what they don't want you to realize. Jung taught that beneath our personal unconscious is something deeper, collective unconscious, shared by all people. It's the source of your deepest instincts, your gut feelings, your emotional truth, your sense of right and wrong. Manipulators try desperately to cut you off from this. They make you believe your intuition is faulty, your reactions are overblown, your emotional instincts unreliable. But here's what Jung found: this deeper knowing can never be fully destroyed. He said, your task is not to seek love, but to find and remove the barriers within yourself that you've built against it. But what if those barriers were never yours? What if someone else put them there? And now we reach the most important moment. Jung taught that real healing comes from facing the shadow, acknowledging the parts of yourself you tried to hide. But here's the twist. Recognizing you've been manipulated is shadow work. It means facing the fact that someone betrayed your trust, that you let them, that you lost a piece of yourself trying to keep peace. Jung said, one does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. That darkness isn't just in the manipulator. It's in the part of you that silenced yourself to avoid conflict. But that realization isn't weakness. It's your liberation. He said, the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. But after being manipulated, you might forget who that even is. The good news. Jung believed that your true self, your essence, can never be destroyed. It can be buried, confused, or hidden, but it's always there, and it's always trying to bring you home. You begin that journey with what Jung called active start, reconnecting with your inner voice. Practice what Jung called active imagination. Ask yourself, what do I actually think about this? How do I feel when I remove their version of the story? Next, reclaim your shadow. Embrace the parts of yourself that the manipulator forced you to bury: your anger, your boundaries, your right to push back. These aren't personality flaws. They're vital pieces of your wholeness. Then, trust your deeper wisdom. Jung discovered that each of us is connected to ancient patterns of psychological truth. Your instinct to protect yourself, your urge to speak up, your drive to seek clarity, these aren't faults. They are sacred psychological imperatives. Now, here's the most powerful thing Jung ever revealed. Individuation creates what we could call psychological sovereignty. That means you become the ultimate authority over your own experience. And that, right there, is a manipulator's worst nightmare. An individuated person doesn't need outside approval to validate what they know is true. They don't need permission to listen to their guts. They don't compromise their truth just to keep the peace. Carl Jung said, everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves. But someone who's individuated adds everything that tries to control me leads me back to my power. Because here's what Jung understood better than most. When you heal from manipulation, you're not just healing yourself. You're contributing to what he called the collective healing. Every person who refuses to be psychologically controlled makes it harder for manipulation to thrive in families, in workplaces, in communities. Jung showed us that personal growth creates ripples. Your journey to authenticity gives others permission to begin their own. Now here's the final truth that pulls it all together. Jung once said, the most important question anyone can ask is, what myth am I living? And after being manipulated, you get to choose a new myth, one where you are the hero, not a background character in someone else's chaos. Escaping manipulation isn't just about cutting off toxic people. It's about beginning a sacred, lifelong relationship with yourself. It's about honoring what Jung called the self, that untouchable, resilient core within you that no one can corrupt. And here's the beautiful truth he discovered. Once you've walked this path once, you've reclaimed your power, owned your shadow, and trusted your inner knowing, you'd become almost impossible to manipulate. Not because you've put up cold defenses, but because you're so deeply rooted in who you are that lies and games can't take hold. They slide right off. You become what Jung would call an individuated soul, someone who knows themselves, believes in their own truth, and refuses to abandon themselves for anyone. And Jung's final lesson may be his deepest. The journey back to your true self is the hardest thing you'll ever do, but also the most freeing. Because when you fully know yourself, shadow and light, pain and wisdom, fear and strength, you become unshakable. Not because you're invincible, but because you finally trust yourself to handle anything. You remember what Jung always knew. You are not what someone else says you are. You are not your trauma, your doubt, or your past silence. You are a sovereign being full of inner wisdom, endless strength, and the absolute right to be authentically, unapologetically yourself. And that, my friend, is the one truth no manipulator will ever be able to steal. Music swells and fades, because, as Carl Jung discovered, the true privilege of a lifetime isn't just being who you are. It's remembering that you've always had the power to decide exactly who that is. Thank you so much for being here and walking through this with me. If today's message meant something to you, please subscribe to the channel and share this video with someone who needs to hear it.